Hey, my name is ShawN, and I sell art on shawnshawn.co and specials on eBay. Today we're going to review Rogue Artist Survival Guide. So this is a book by Rafi Perez. The editor is Kali Angeli, his wife. So it's basically, the ideas of a lot of Rafi, also as well as Kali. Some of this stuff is in here. The way this book came about was, they were working both in Chicago 10 or 11 years ago. And, Rafi got fed up with his last job, didn't work out right. And he decided to go on this huge journey. He meets Kali. And then they kind of do this 2-year journey around selling art and working part-time around the country, and they settled into northern Florida, Pensacola, and that's kind of where their studio is today. And then that's where this book kind of comes about after the 10 years of kind of going over a lot of notebooks that Rafi kept along the way and boiling all those ideas into a book to kind of help beginning artists to kind of figure out, like, how do you become from part-time artist to make that journey to the full-time artist. So it has a lot of different kind of key factors that you can consider. Obviously, as an artist, every artist is unique, so the journey is going to be a little bit different than one artist. Some artists can be photography, and then that might be way different than painting or jewelry. You could be hitting different markets. Everyone's taste in art is different, so it's a very unique process, which I think Rafi tries to get across in his book. There's also a really nice set of diagrams and pictures from the notes, or made to look like from his old notes. So he has that kind of scattered through the book. It kind of breaks up the text, so you get a look at his artwork, a little picture of him and his wife. And so that kind of breaks up the tedium of reading a lot of text. Obviously, if you're an artist, you're probably not going to be bored, but it kind of adds a little bit of spice and personality to the book. The only downside I would say in the book, I was hoping that they would have the journey of how they traveled around, because I was kind of maybe considering that myself, so that's not in there. But yeah, he wanted to focus on, the journey of being an artist, not necessarily that small chunk. I think he might cover it in a future book, so stay tuned. We'll see where that comes out. So I'll kind of go through some of the major topics of the book, which I thought were done well. He covers his education, how they kind of steer kids to be less creative and really don't gear you to be successful as an artist. As well as, you can have parents or siblings or uncles and aunts that may be well-meaning and kind of steer you away from art when really your passion's art. So you got to kind of break through that. So you can't always rely on your close relatives to guide you and steer you in life. As you get older, you probably want to find your own mentors, so to say. He covers some of the art stereotypes that artists face, the starving artist and how they're wacky, and you got to kind of break through a lot of those stereotypes and learn what the reality is yourself. You also, nowadays, you don't need to go through the gallery system. That was kind of from the early 1900s up till probably the 1980s in 1990s when kind of the internet came out, and then that kind of changed and revolutionized the art world, and you can now sell online, so you can bypass the gallery system. And so he talks a little bit about that. Another topic he covers is getting over self-limiting beliefs. So that's kind of a really hard thing for artists as well as anyone doing kind of their own business. It's really, you're going to face a lot of challenges, and you need to kind of see the reality and then say, well, I'm not there yet, but I can see the goal, and just push to the goal. And then, every time, all the journey along the way is going to be hard, so you have to kind of push through that. You only get stuck if you kind of give up in the middle, which a lot of people do. They start, and then, after a while they quit. And Rafi went through that early on in his career of kind of starting, stopping, and having bad influences, and he kind of finally got rid of those bad influence or minimize their influence, and then he was able to kind of break through. There's also rejection as an artist. Obviously, if you've done art for a while, like I have, everyone knows that you're gonna submit your art to different submissions, and there's probably like 1 in 10 chance of getting in, so you got this 90% chance of rejection, so you're gonna face a lot of rejection. And this is just kind of the process of being an artist. And he talks about how you can just realistically, accept the emotion of it, but then learn from it, like, oh, I could have tried this differently. There's only so many people get in. I'll try next year. This kind of, take a positive spin on it and learn your lesson versus dwelling in the negative. Also, mistakes are kind of part of the process. It's not going to be a straightforward shot like is if you have a typical career path. You go to education, then you get in your beginning and you kind of rise through the ranks of the corporate ladder. So that's kind of your traditional, what people assume the career path is being. For artists, it can be all over the place. You could start, selling in flea markets and become a muralist, and then you go online, and then maybe you get in the galleries later. So it can be all over the place. So there's a lot of different opportunities, and you have to keep your mind really open to those opportunities because it can be different for each artist. Some artists go straight to the gallery system, it works for them. Other people stay on art fairs and that works for them, or local flea markets, local markets. So there's a lot of different approaches you can take. Another thing he really talks about that I think is important is don't compare yourself to other artists. There's always going to be better, higher qualified artists. If you're in realism, there's always going to be hyper-realism or even, mind-blowing art. It's good to see that and be like, wow, I want to aspire to that, but always the only thing you should really compare to is who you were yesterday. How are you evolving as an artist? As long as you're evolving and trying new stuff, that's going to be the important part, which I think is a really good thing to take away. And there's always a market for all different types of art. I mean, obviously you have to hit some kind of minor bar of quality, but once you break through that, I think, there's a lot of different markets for a lot of different people. Another thing is you have to overcome, negatives that you're going to be in your life, either rejections or just negative beliefs, and kind of focus on the positive. So he talks about rewiring your brain and make sure your past isn't dominating your future, saying, oh, my parents did this and my parents did that. You got to rewire and say like, well, my parents taught me that. It wasn't a positive experience, but I learned this from that and I learned how to deal with that. And as long as you kind of positively rewire your memories, they can serve you as to go forward versus holding you back. He has another little bit of chapter on critics, how to deal with that. That's obviously a touch point for a lot of artists. Mainly he's just talking like, listen to maybe an objective, from an art expert that you respect that actually does art, not just like critic, but actually does art. And maybe you can learn some constructive feedback from them, but there'll be a lot of haters and there'll be a lot of things. And just realize really the haters and trolls are you're kind of breaking through their stereotype because you're succeeding as an artist. They're not, maybe they're failed artists. So then like, no, you can't fail, you can't succeed. And so they'll criticize you. So you got to keep that in perspective. Don't let it go to your heart and try to ignore the trolls. There's just no positive gain out of that. Obviously, he has a little bit of section about how to use your materials. I won't cover that too much. Obviously, you just experiment, right? I think that's a good chapter. I won't go into what he covers there too much. He does have kind of his basic day. He kind of boils down. One thing is meditation. He starts out his day as meditation. I've used it myself. I can say that definitely helps. It quiets kind of the noise in your brain if you kind of focus. So meditation is always just focusing on nothing and don't allow yourself to think at all, which is kind of a weird process. But as you practice that, you'll get better and better at it. And then once you come out of that, your brain can, anytime you get kind of like, frazzled, you can be like, no, let's just meditate. And you can really quiet the noise out of your mind, and that really helps you accomplish your goals. Another thing he talks about is create daily. So obviously as an artist, you want to always be creating. That really keeps your creative juices flowing. You also have to create a lot of work, so that keeps you consistent. If you're creating daily, you're already on that path of creating a lot of art. He says write your ideas down, which obviously is great. He wrote all these diaries to write this book, so he had tons and tons of material. So I totally buy into that. If you write your ideas down, for example, every idea that I have for a painting, but I can't start right away, I'll write it down in my art ideas. And so I literally have, 50 paintings I'm supposed to finish. So I can testify that's a good focus. And he talks about kind of the big four. So every day he kind of plans out his day and he puts like big four, like the biggest 4 chunks he wants to finish. And then everything else is kind of falls by the wind, or not falls by the wind, but so to say, but it's kind of extra details. If you get it, great. If not, but just get those 4 large tasks done. And then whatever you don't finish from the day before, just add it as the first thing you do the next day. So you kind of have that rolling to-do list. He talks on how he uses social media to market, more or less kind of being himself, being authentic. He doesn't really use paid advertising. I don't know if I agree with that, but that's kind of Rafi's approach. He talks about time management, how you get focused, eliminate a lot of stuff that just saying no on, minor stuff that isn't going to help you, like your friends want to go out to eat and all this stuff. You got to stay focused on the task at hand. You got to minimize your unhealthy relationships. What I had to do myself, I can totally testify that. You want to get rid of those people that are negative influences in your life, or just minimize them. I think in Rafi's case, it was kind of his father was this negative influence. So by him living far away in Florida, also it's an art market versus Chicago. But it kind of, that distance kind of helped probably him progress as an artist versus having his dad telling him like, you've got to join the jewelry business and all this razzmatazz. I know for myself, probably my mom is a really bad influence. I've minimized contact with her, so I can testify that's, you definitely have to break those unhealthy relationships, no matter how close they are to you, unfortunately. He says don't get swept up in titles. He kind of went through a period where he's adding more and more titles to his thing. You do need to use this in marketing, so I don't know if I agree with that, but you don't want to kind of self-limit, like say, oh, I'm an abstract painter, because then if you go into realism, you're like, I don't know. I have to do abstract only, or I only have to watercolor. So you never define yourself by, I see your materials. You can say you're a painter, like I say I'm a painter, but I could go into photography. But I know, since I've always done painting and advertised as a painter, I'm reluctant to do photography, so that's kind of the crux. You kind of wanted to use more generic terms like artist and maybe your tagline versus these specific like award-winning artists. He has a chapter about art scams. I have my own a couple tips on there too. I won't cover that, just they're out there. So there are some basic art scams that beginning artists are come against. It's always good to work, in my view, in a small studio with other artists for a small time period, because you learn about all these different art scams and art problems that different artists face, and then you can be like, oh, take all that generalized knowledge and then move forward to your own studio. He talks about getting around the market gatekeepers. So traditionally the gallerists were, and before that it was the Grand Salon in the late 1800s. And so you can kind of get around that because they have art fairs, they have art markets, flea markets. So you don't really need to go through that gatekeeper gallery system. You can go that way, but you don't need to go that way. So that's kind of what he talks about. And I have the same viewpoint. I always see, if you look in the art field, you'll see a lot of artists, they have only their art up, only their portfolio, they have nothing else, no personality. And then you have other artists like me or say Rafi, where there's a lot of personality in the website. So it's always like, well, should I go this route or that route? And I agree with Rafi. You can go this route where you can be very authentic, personally you. You can set up your own website. You can sell through online galleries. So there's just different options out there. So just keep your mind open to the different opportunities. He talks about multiple streams of income. So that really helps as, just don't focus on, say, eBay, or just don't focus on Etsy. On your online, you might only have a few different streams, but you can do like t-shirts, you can do prints, limited prints or open limited prints. You could do like maybe a side business like Uber to kind of supplement your income. So you want to have kind of multiple streams, and that'll really help spread out the income. So if one falls by the wayside, it doesn't sink the whole business. I know myself, I'm kind of guilty of that, trying to rely too much on eBay, and then kind of eBay's kind of gone down the hill over time. And I'm like, is it just better art out there? And I feel like my art's getting better. So I think, establishing different ways to sell your art really helps. I'm also on Saatchi online, and that worked well in the beginning. Now it's kind of saturated, I think. So you just gotta kind of continually experiment with different streams of income. See what works, and then what doesn't, just let it, die off. That's just how it is in business. For clients, he's talking about really you want to strive for friendships. So if you get a really good friendship with this person, you're gonna have that long-term bond, and that leads to them collecting a lot of your works. If it's just kind of a one-time transaction, after a while they're like, well, that guy's kind of a jerk, I don't know if I want to buy more work. So you want to kind of continually expand your reach and presence through positive experiences, positive relationships with people. And I can definitely buy into that. I think the more you're friendly with people and the more you help other people, the more they'll say, oh, this guy helped me out, maybe I want to buy art. So if you help other artists, like he does on his website, I do that on my website, it gives you a lot of positivity, and eventually some of those artists will be like, oh, I want to buy something from that person because they helped me, as an artist. So that's always a positive thing. And I think he talked about something else about stepping up. I don't remember how he phrased it, but there's kind of like you go through phases. And I know he started kind of in flea markets. He did that for a while, and then he kind of mastered that. And he said, well, I want to move over to art fairs, local markets. And then he kind of mastered that, and then he moved up. Now I think he's doing maybe a couple galleries. And so he's kind of slowly moving up the chain in the art market. So you always want to challenge yourself. And as you master that, you might get bored and try to move up. So always level up and try to get better and better, try new things, push yourself, outseed your limits. And I think that's basically it. I probably missed a couple of points in the book, but hopefully I didn't give away the whole book. You just listen to the video versus buying his book. It's a really good book. I think you can reread that and get a lot out of it. It's important to kind of have those books to kind of keep you in a positive mindset. You can read it, probably once a year to kind of refresh your book. I always encourage people to read really good books. So I think it's a pretty good book. I recommend it. If you guys want to see more, I have art books below, and I'll see you in the next book review.